Okay, so I named this field perpetual transistors because in perpetual in quotation marks here, because it would technically not really be perpetual, because like perpetual first off starts with no real energy input and then makes more. All right, so this isn't doing that. Straight up, that's just what that is. Uh, that also being said, it's perpetual quotation marks because I am technically speaking, while I'm getting more energy out, only as a consequence of effectively in a given little tiny area that's making what is the equivalent of a very sealed environment have a modulation and change to the level of forces of our fundamental forces seen and imparted on the virtual particles into the given like regular stuff that we are, and it's a not actually changed that thing. I know, it's a cheese mode workaround effectively. Like a really good way of putting it. Okay, so I'm cheesing fundamental forces to appear as though that they have been modulated or changed at all. All right, they never did and never were, but things thought briefly that they were long enough that that information was sent and ultimately changed the result at the end, allowing for an increase of energy that wouldn't be there otherwise and should not be there otherwise. See what I'm saying? So, that kind of a thing. Now, the basic premise is virtual. I have to describe this virtual particles for people out there that don't even know what that is. So, it's like I came up with an analogy, and now I'm going to describe that to you. Because an analogy for me for virtual is like it's this AI, all right? That's you're in a room, you're trying to solve a mystery murder. That's the game for it, like kind of like an escape room, I guess, but it's not really. But there's an AI that's there. They don't technically exist. It's just an AI, but it modulates. And then the story is such that the people you're trying to talk to and the murderer and so on, they're not real. They're not in the room. That's not a thing. They're a part of the computer thing. So you ultimately have to interact and interfere with each other and the computer and its story the right way, such that you can solve the mystery, right? Now, this totally not a thing. That's just a story, even though someone made it that is real, and you interacting with it is real, and it modulating and changing your behavior and decision making is definitely real, and the AI is more real than the story. It doesn't change that they're still doing that thing. That means that you change your decision based upon the information you receive, and your actions, therefore, later over time too. Okay, like that's the analogy that I use for virtual. And so, like, this would be a version of I'm creating a story to a virtual that then makes you, the real, act differently. No actual change has occurred. You have to remember that part. Uh, no fundamental forces really were modulated or ever affected, really, with this. And the basics is that a bunch of virtual creates a given technicality continuation of a information change that runs through them that will then eventually create a given enough effect as they go through and interact with our types of particles and, atoms that change and turn into what they do, right? But it makes it such that it now suddenly moved farther than they would have normally otherwise. Alright, as if it had a stronger electromagnetic, or a stronger gravitational, or a stronger nuclear level of force suddenly occur briefly during that point. Now, how do you modulate virtual? Well, virtuals are just virtuals, so they don't technically even exist. You see what I'm saying? And so you don't do any of that. You can't do any of that. But what you can do is set up the stuff that we are. Look at your hands. There's a bunch of stuff there that's we are stuff. So you might want to look at those first before you go, what's that meaning? And it's like, well, look at your hands, idiots. And then these things, they exist. And they're real. So use that first as your reference. Anyways, they're going to create fields. But they're not going to create fields. Alright, so we're going to create virtual fields. We're going to create more than just virtual fields, though. We're going to create a introduction of tiny, minute, small-lived both fields and particles by utilizing those fields. Now, not stupendously difficult, because what we're talking about is a certain amount, a photon destructive interference that gets modulated by the correct electromagnetic and basically charge field differences. So it's like we're going to have it go through a given electromagnetic, have a gain of certain information, and then have, because it is considered positive versus negative over here, that draws it and attracts it. Now, this turns into, we need to get it into a vacuum. Doesn't need to be super cold, though. Just needs to be in a vacuum. Needs to be a series of plates inside of a box. So, like, you're going to have that box, that's your vacuum, and you're going to have plates, so one above another, and then off to the sides. Alright? And that's all to create the correct little fields that we're looking for. And light that is allowed to be entered in and destructively interfered. Kind of like, what is it, the angled, I just heard it a little while ago. Anyways, they're nozzles that hit each other and then create kind of what looks a little bit like a teardrop shape with these little waves that eventually spray off into a bunch of little, droplets. Some dude did it on YouTube, but it's like, oh yeah, so that's what they call it, and that's the word they use. Huh. I just called them angled nozzles because it's obviously what they are. But whatever, sure. But basically the same thing. That's also why plates are not flat 2D. You need to think Z height, bro. You need to think 3D. We're going into the not flat land. We're going into dimensions. The reason why I say this is because working with people that believe they know things about quantum physics ends up making me angry, because an actual quantum physicist would in no way give a fuck about it being, oh, this is flat land, and I immediately thought flat land. So it's like, you're probably not one if you thought that. And that's why I'm mocking you. Because you probably think yourself better than others. And so, I'm not thinking that, and I'm not going to let you think that. We're all in this ride together. Alright? So, as a result of having the photons effectively create a given field dynamic that we can interact with, that we can capture with that electromagnetic pulse, that can then be ridden, and it will reflect back. Just so everybody's clear on this, there are waves of not just photons, but also electromagnetic and electrostatic charge fields that will oscillate and resonate. And so when you do this appropriately throughout the length of these plates, and at the right corrected interval of times, meaning you timed it right, what you end up achieving is a way to create virtual containments and fields that are now stuck together to those little virtual particles that can then be altered accordingly such that they believe they had gained more electro and chromodynamic fundamental changes. They believe it's stuck to their given information on top of other fundamental forces. Okay? Now, we're only modulating in that given area. Okay? So this is one of the reasons why it's not really a true perpetual, right? First off, we have to put in energy, not information, energy. Okay, person trying to interrupt. Then, while yes, they can get more out, so we're clear, it'll continuously keep this going. Once it's set up, it will keep doing that. It then means you can use less energy, and this will increase the degree of energy that you receive for your version of it goes through a given transistor-like cadence and cascading of information change. Kind of like a transistor or a CPU, which is why I called them transistors. It modulated what was going through as an input, and it came out as a degree of change output that was increased to varying amounts, is what we're talking about. As a result, that means I'm getting more out every time than I'm putting in. So that's why it's called a quotation marks perpetual. You know, it's not a real perpetual by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm not going to claim it is. But it will supposedly continue to do this because quantum vacuum pressure is not the equivalent of, us. So, the problem that I was trying to work out with idiots around me that I was talking to, that are not here, that are connected somehow, some way, that I talked to, believed that it would be something that I'm making more of a idea of this risk during heat death for our universe than it would be, believed or should be believed or thought of as big of a risk of it not possibly working. Heat death works off of the fact that that continuation of acceleration is always going to be there. And we don't know that. Then, because it works off of fields, we don't know at all if the field continuation, meaning energy as is now, will be the same then. We don't know if vacuum pressure will get increased to the degree where it might change and alter even field dynamics. And so they were like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, and he's trying to make it seem like it's not something we should pursue, and blah, blah. And I'm like, no, go ahead and pursue this. I'm more of the, you're an idiot that thinks that it's not that big of a deal. You think that you can see that far forward. Please, O wise one, show us all of the things. Tell me everything that you will see and know and hear. I would love to know how to live in the heat death of our universe. You fucking idiot. Tell me, please, all of the things I need to know, because I'd love to hear it. Meanwhile, this is exactly what I'm doing. I learned about these things. I then told people. I said them out loud. Whatever time thing that might have been. And what do you know? Study after study after study, blah, 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 blah. So, whatever. Say what you want, but that's what that would be. Especially since it's like, no, I'm just a crazy person that's just believing things. I'm not going to record this. This would be embarrassing. This would be insanely embarrassing to record this. I'd be an insane person. I don't want to fucking look like that. But, there's that. So, not that they didn't always record anyways. It's a little subtle hint that you can pretty much always find out that they're pretty much consistently always listening to everyone. And you have to remember, for me, it's like, yeah, so what's special about me? I don't care. You know what I mean? Whatever, I'm just a regular person and had some mental difficulties and ended up homeless and stuff. And yeah, sure, whatever in the past, it would have just been like, yeah, they are, and everybody knows that. Or if they don't, then they're just really dumb people that never fucking bothered to try and learn how much the government and corporations spy on us, and how easy it would genuinely be to just, do that with impunity, practically. And so, I end up just going, well, it probably means nothing to you, or me, or anything, right? It's only as a consequence of what I've gone through and what I said may or may not happen, and so on and so forth, occurring where that's exactly what happened, and that's exactly what did not happen, and so on. That made me end up going and talking about this. Which is why it's like, nice gaslight, bro. Maybe a little investigation before you say no. Nice, just go into the hole and die, please. That kind of thing. I hate them. They honestly think that they're intelligent things. They're not. And big strong, you rape, blah, 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 blah. No rape has ever occurred. By me ever. Or sexual assault. By me ever. So, I don't know. It feels like they're, projecting here at this point. you know, projecting is pretty obvious when someone's got like that kind of fear internally of themselves that they would have thoughts or feelings about doing something to someone, might even have plans. Like that's obvious projection. Like if you're that afraid, like, and you have to be obsessive about something, you either have certain mental disorders yourself, or you have that type of fear that leads you to pursue that avenue of belief. So, we'll move off of that. But, same thing when it comes down to the field perpetual transistors. It's like, they're not really. You know what I mean? Like, they'll be able to eventually produce enough, given the correct and right amount of sizing to this entire thing, that it could theoretically run itself off of what it's able to produce in extra energy. But that being said, it's not known if whether or not it will be able to outlast a heat death. So there's that. And that's also not getting into whether or not quantum vacuum pressure will destabilize this in such a way that it no longer works over time, as it either decreases or increases its given effects, because that's what allows for a virtual particle to begin with to even be anything at all from the start. So for me, it's like, it's technically speaking a perpetual. Yes, I do have to input energy, but we've got enough energy to input to make this. So that's not the problem. We even have the ability to make enough of these and start the process that it could run itself for a very long time. We wouldn't know how long. That's basically all it would be. You know? It's like, well, it's nothing though. And I'm like, yeah, nothingness can have a lot of power to it too, turns out. I mean, we should know. There are more than enough people that we'd wish were genuinely gone and dead. Still nothing people, you know what I mean? People that are utter scumbags in our lives or others' lives. We know that they're the reasons for a lot of problems that are going on around us. And despite being nothing, they still have quite a bit of effect, don't they? You know what I mean? Meanwhile, I think that's probably done, because it's like, that describes most of it pretty well. There's some other stuff I ended up doing that's different for my like big idea transistor, using that kind of field modulating stuff, uh, which is more to do with a change in how it is fields around us are believed to be fields, utilizing the virtual situation of virtual particles and virtual fields. You see, there's an outside to the plates. And for what it's worth, light can be reflected outside there too. And so, as it moves and as light comes in, as a vacuum is in no way necessary to have just air be gone. You usually think about light too. Well, why. If I modulate that outside box to only allow certain light in certain areas and given electromagnetic frequency, pulses, Wi-Fi, radio wave, so on, then it actually helps with the design. Same thing with electromagnetic fields of we're in one called Earth's magnetosphere, so that's something I can use too. So, anyways. Bye.